Welcome back, everyone. We're now going to start our second tutorial by Katiúscia Cassemiro. Katiúscia received her PhD in 2008 from the University of São Paulo, working on quantum optics. She held a Humboldt Fellowship and was awarded the L'Oréal Prize for Women in Science, the Brazilian component. And early in her career, she became a professor at the Federal University of Pernambuco. In 2015, she joined the American Physical Society as an assistant editor with Physical Review A. And in 2019, she joined the team that designed PRX Quantum, of which she's now the co-managing editor. And today, Katiúscia is going to tell us how to publish our results in the Physical Review journals. So, Katiúscia, thank you so much for giving this presentation here.
Thanks for the kind introduction, and thanks everyone for keeping up with this talk. Let me share my slides. Hold on. Oops, 1 sec. Okay, I try it again. Now, can you see it? Okay, good. All right. So let me start. I just want to say a few words about myself. So Rodrigo already told you about my background, but there are two important things I still to mention. One is, as he said, a lot of the research that I did was in Brazil, so I owe a lot to this community. So I just want to say one thing, at least in Portuguese. So, é realmente um grande prazer poder estar dando essa palestra aqui hoje num evento brasileiro. Então, muito obrigada pela oportunidade. The other thing I want to mention is also the fact that, of course, throughout my career, I had a lot of experience in dealing with research articles. First of all, of course, as a reader, but then as an author, and later on as a referee, and now as an editor. And it became really clear to me that there is a lot of room for improving our awareness about the review process. And because of that, I recently created a blog where I share a little bit of an inside view of the review process. So a lot of what I'm going to say here today, I try to be adding in there in a few posts. So you may check the blog as well. Okay. I want to start my talk actually mentioning Matteo. So probably most of you watched his excellent talk in the last session about how to write a good scientific paper. There is one little tale in which Matteo is part of it. The first time I went to a business trip with him, he presented himself to our host saying something like, well, I am this happy guy that shows a beautiful newborn to the world. And of course, he's referring to the very best papers published in the Physical Review. So he has all the reason to be excited. But then Matteo went on to present the other editors of the other Physical Review journals. And he said something like, well, these guys, they are a little grumpy because they work in the emergency room. And so I was thinking about that, and there is some truth in that. And it's not the fact that we are grumpy, but I think perhaps a little bit of a better analogy that I would like to use in this talk is actually that what we are doing most of the times, or what we would like to be doing, is more like this doctor that's going to check on you every year. And so when a paper comes in, I have to ask for, let's say, a few exams just to check if everything is fine. That's the main goal initially. And of course, when the exams come back, I have a look, and if everything is fine, it means, okay, paper is published. Now, the problem starts when these exams show some kind of dubious results. And then we have to scrutinize much more. and that's when you may end up in an emergency room. So I think if you are here today, most probably it's because you want to avoid the emergency room. You want to know a little bit, so some tips on what you can do to have a smoother review process. That's what I want to tell you. But just let's start also having very clear in mind that one of the initial point in here is having a solid paper, right? A very strong paper. And there are some components in there. The first is, of course, your own research, and that's completely your role. And I'm gonna trust, of course, that you did a very good analysis of your results, that you have a strong result, you have some good results to present, right? It was everything done according to the scientific method. Now, there are other components of this strong paper, right? One is the result, but then is how you presented this result. It's what Matteo just told us. And then there is this other part, that how you're going to communicate that to the editor and to the referees. And this is the part that I want to cover now. So we're going to start with the part that you have your result, but before writing the paper, you have to think what is the best journal that you would submit this manuscript. So, okay, I said that. Right. So how can you think about the different options of journals? So nowadays there are really an industry in there, and you have journals that, I'm sorry, I have the Zoom video on the top of the slides and it's a little strange, but okay. So we have an industry of journals. Some of them are gonna take papers that are mainly correct. It doesn't matter if you are really advancing a lot of science. It doesn't matter. If it's correct, it's okay. Some other journals going to the other extreme, they want unique results, meaning that those results, they should be communicated to a vast community. So in disparate fields, in all fields of science, let's say. So those are the unique results. And you have to judge by yourself what you have at hand, where you place it in this scale. And it's not changing. Okay. So one rule of thumb is try to explain for yourself in one sentence, what is it that you achieved? And then see how many qualifiers you have to add to your explanation so that you make your results different from what has been done before in the literature. And as you need to add more and more qualifiers, you're essentially going down this scale. Of course, this is just a rule of thumb. There are exceptions to that, but it's a way that you can gauge where your results stand. One other thing to consider is also the scope of the readership. So are your results relevant for people working with fundamental science? They are relevant for people working in applied sciences, so they're more to the industrial side of things. Maybe the results are very relevant for computer scientists. So you have to consider who are going to be interested in reading your paper. And if you believe that all of these communities should actually be looking at your paper, this again means that you are going up in this scale of selectivity. So that's more or less a way for you to try to think what are the journals that you should consider. There is one more thing in here, which is to think about society journals versus commercial publishers. So in a society journal, we are not looking for profit. And there are different society journals. Of course, I'm going to focus in the APS because it's where I work. So the mission of APS is to advance and diffuse the knowledge of science. But on the top of the journals, we do several other things for the community. And you can have a look in our website for the several different programs. But for example, we have some people working with policy and advocacy that are fighting for having a better budget for research. We also engage with the community in matters of equity and promoting ethical behavior. So there are several things that we do. Concerning the journals, we have 16 physical review journals. And one thing that I want to mention is that if you look for the top 1% most cited papers in physics, so you focus on this group, 30% of those papers, they were published in a physical review journal, which I think it's a quite impressive number. And when it comes to the editors, we have a very diverse group working for the physical review. Okay, so now focusing on the journals that we have, and even if you decide for a different society or commercial publisher, most probably you're going to find different kinds of journals in there. And again, consider this criteria in here to choose the one that better fits for your manuscript. So importance, in the case of the physical review family, we have the PRL and PRX as flagship journals, meaning that the articles publishing there, they should have an appeal to all physicists. PRX is an open access journal. So some authors are required by funding editors to publish it only in open access. So again, since as a society we want to serve the community, we created venues that are open access to serve for this kind of for those authors. We recently created PRX Quantum, which is also a journal for top research. With the difference in here that we are focused on a narrow community, we are really looking for the papers that are of interest for the quantum science and technology community. So those are the ones that we consider in PRX. Now, if you think that your readership is a little bit more specialized, there are also different options in the physical review. One thing that I should mention is also the format. Take a look before you start to write your paper. So, for example, if you decided that you would like to submit to PRL, then you have to write a letter, meaning that you have a length limit. So those are the things that you have to think about when you are writing. Sometimes you really see that you have an exceptional result, but you just cannot explain it well in a short length, in a short size paper. So in those cases, in the physical review family, then you will have a PRX if your paper has an appeal to a broad community. If it's in quantum information science, you could send to PRX Quantum. So, okay, and as Matteo said, you should always pay attention to the readership of the journal when you decide to write your paper. Have them in mind when you're composing the paper. All right, so I am sorry, but I have to say just a few words about the PRX Quantum, of course, since it's my journal. Very briefly, the only thing that I want to highlight in here is that differently from the other journals of the physical review, we're not focusing only on the physics community. We also want to welcome engineers, computer science, people working with more the mathematical side, chemistry, anyone that is producing knowledge in quantum information science and technology. And because of that, we are also publishing invited articles, perspectives, and tutorials as a tool to help these different communities to get together to share knowledge. Okay, so Matteo already talked a lot about how to write a paper once you decided the journal that you're going to submit. I just want to perhaps emphasize again the idea that you should really simplify a lot your paper, not only the sentences, the writing, but as well the way in which you can explain some physical process or your results. If you can have some easy picture in your mind, how to tell how the process happens, if you can have some back of envelope calculation that gives the idea, explore that in the paper. This is good. Now, when I receive a paper in the physical review, typically you're going to find this structure. So an abstract, introduction, then you have your results, conclusion. But again, what we are going to try to see is what you have done, the why, how. I will not look too much the how. I look a little bit, but here I heavily rely on the referees. But the what and the why, and why it matters, what are the new possibilities, this for sure, it's what we want to have a very, in a way, a quick glance at the paper and have this sharp, clear what you have achieved in the paper, why it matters. But, okay, this part I don't mention too much, Matteo already did. So you wrote your, you know the journal, you wrote your paper, then comes the time to submit. And when you're going to submit, you have also to write a cover letter to the editor. Not all journals are going to require a cover letter, some do, but it's good. It can help you. As Matteo said, if the cover letter is not well written, it will not impact the review of your paper, but it can help you. And what is the idea in here? Think the following: you're about to submit your paper, you should be happy. So let's say you get in the elevator with your friend, a colleague that is a physicist, but doesn't work in the same field as you. And so you have essentially 30 seconds to tell this colleague what you achieved in a very informal way. You tell what is your result, why it matters. This is what I want to see in the cover letter. It can be informal, but it can also be very formal if you prefer, if it's your style. But it's a conversation with the editor, and I don't expect to see something that is the same as what is in the paper, because I'm going to read the paper anyway. So I want to know in different words if you can tell me very quickly these two things. And then, of course, you can also use the cover letter for saying a few other things. For example, if you are aware of conflict of interest and you would like us to avoid some referees, so to tell the editors, and you may also suggest a few referees. It's always good if you can address the acceptance criteria of the journal, and so you justify why among all journals you decide to submit to us. So tell me what is the reason, and if there is any relationship between your article and any other one that you are about to publish or is under review somewhere else, so it's good that you mention. Okay, so then you have everything ready, you submit your paper. As soon as I see your paper, I have to judge if I'm gonna send it to a referee or not. Sometimes we reject papers up front, and the reason is really that I wanna use referees in a very wise way. So we don't have that many referees, and I have to decide when it makes sense to consult a referee. Some cases are trivial to know that I should not send to a referee. It can be a crackpot paper, fine. Some cases it's just that the topic is not okay, the scope. So it might be that the paper would fit better in a chemical physics journal, that it was written in a style that seems like you're communicating to a different community. Sometimes the authors are happy about that. They recognize that in truth, we are really saving time for the authors because we're avoiding a long review process to come up with a conclusion that was clear from the beginning. That's the idea. Some cases are a little bit more hard to decide if we send to referees or not, in the sense that the paper is good. You can see it seems solid. It seems fine. But there is something in there that tells us that the importance level is not correct. And we recognize this has quite a subjective component in some cases. And then one way that we have to make the process, if you can think more fair, is that we're going to discuss with other editors. Sometimes we discuss with the board members or some other member of the community that we have some more trust for some reason. And then we may reject or not, depending on the consensus that we achieve. Now, when I send a paper to you as a referee, what I want is the following. So first of all, if you think you can review, tell us and tell what is the time frame, when can I expect your report. But if you are not going to review, decline promptly. And we want to avoid the delays in the review process. So you may suggest alternative referees, and we also encourage you to write joint reports. It's a way to introduce new people to the system, but of course you should mention that, and we give due credit to the people that helped you to prepare the report. Because of time, I will not go in the details of why you should be a referee, but we can go through in the questions if you want. And I would like to say what we expect to read in this report. Please write it in a collegial way. And what I would like to see in that, it's kind of similar to the cover letter of the authors, but now coming from the referee, and it's a way to cross-check if things are consistent. So I want to know what is the summary of the paper, what the paper is about, what has been achieved. I want to know the context. So if you say, oh, this is a very good paper, okay, that it's too vague. Can you compare with previous results in the literature? That gives a better way to gauge if this is considerably more relevant or not. Can you tell us what the community is trying to achieve and how close this result is coming to the final end? And then, of course, we rely on the referees to give a technical judgment of the paper. We welcome comments on the presentation and clarity. And sometimes the editor may have specific queries that are going to be included in the referral, so pay attention to those as well and answer to the best that you can. When you are returning your report, in the physical review journals at least, there is a field that you can add comments that are exclusive to the editor, that you may comment on things that they're on ethical behavior. So if you suspect of plagiarism, fabricated data, this kind of things, tell the editor. You may comment on the report of another referee, and sometimes it's just an informal way to repeat what you have in your report, but you may say, well, it's a good paper. I think it should be published, but this one is more on technology. The paper was submitted to PRL, so I don't think it fits the criteria, but it's an editorial decision. So you just say in an informal way what you think to the editor. Not always we're going to have consensus, and there are several ways that the editors will go around. Sometimes we consult again the same referees and ask them to comment on the report of each other, and then we see if for some reason they change their mind, if they can explain better, give more arguments for why they think what they think. If still this doesn't solve, in some cases we are going to consult an adjudicating referee, which again, sometimes it's about members, sometimes it's just some other person in the community that we have some higher level of trust. All right, now, of course, when we have the report, the paper goes back to you, and in some cases, it might be that you read things that you are not going to like, and it's always important that you really avoid being impulsive. So you wouldn't believe, but some authors repeat that they reply to us on the exact same day. So never do that. This is a recipe of a disaster. So as people say, you should try to inhabit this space, take your time, breathe. And when you finally think that you can proceed in a constructive way, then you read again the reports. And what we are looking is for substantiated arguments in your rebuttal letter, you should address all comments of the referee, everything, even if you think that the remarks don't make sense. I'm expecting you to explain why in a substantiated way. You are not expected to make every change that the referee are requesting, of course, but you have to tell me if you didn't do a change in the manuscript, why you didn't change. And otherwise, we are expecting that you are gonna make revisions, right? Even if you have the perfect explanation, well, people are not gonna read the reports, they're gonna read just your paper. So you should work on the paper as well to make everything consistent. So, and it always helps if you can provide a list of changes when you resubmit. A highlighted version of the manuscript also is very helpful to make the review process faster. And one other thing important to consider is to use a gender neutral language when you're addressing the referees. There is an editorial, recent editorial on that. It's very common people to say he, and the referee is not a he, and that doesn't go well. So try to use a gender neutral language. And this is an example of something that you should not do. So the author saying, I have to take the camera. We have revised our manuscript only according to the comments of referee A. We have not taken into consideration the comments of referee B, who clearly completely missed the points of our manuscript. It is unfortunate that referee C repeats the same mistake. So in those cases, even if referee B and C miss the point, I would say that most likely your paper is not well written. So you should really take this into account. Okay. One other thing that is there is a lot of misconception in there is the following. When we read the reports, now from the point of view of the editor, if I have two positive reports, one is negative, so for sure I should accept. No, it doesn't work like that. I have to read the reports and see how substantiated they are. That's the first thing. The other thing that, of course, you don't know is more details about who is the referee, right? Is the referee an experimentalist, a theorist, who is working on a topic that's more closely connected to the topic of the paper? It might be, if you submit it to a journal that looks for a broad readership, it might be that we consult a referee that is not expert on the topic of the paper. This is what you asked for from the beginning, right? You're saying that your paper should appeal to everyone. So then if this referee that is working on a different topic is not able to understand your paper, you have to revise it. But my point in here is that we have much more knowledge than what is just in the report. We also know the record of the referee as a referee and as an author. So all of that comes together in our consideration. One other thing that you should also keep in mind is that the editors are, depending on the journal, you might find some curation. There is some curation that goes on in the editorial decision, meaning, so just to exemplify, if you have a very small journal, of course, you want to publish, you cannot afford to publish many papers in the same topic. So you have to pick one, and you're going to have several that are exceptionally good, but you have to pick one. And so that can also happen in some cases, depending on the size of the journal, selectivity level, and so on. Oh yeah, Also, you should be collegial, not only when you are writing to the referees and referees to the authors, but be collegial with the editors as well. And if you have questions, just ask. Don't take your time speculating. It's much better to directly ask. So then just to recap, in the review process, when we receive a new paper, we may reject it up front or decide that the paper should be sent to peer review. After typically 2 rounds of review, we may then decide to accept or reject the paper. If it is accepted, it's quite odd, but some people then stop to read the emails from the journal. No, your paper is accepted, but to be published, there are a few more things in here I'm gonna mention soon in the next slide, I think. If your paper is rejected, again, take your time, think about it. Depending on the reason for rejection, it may be that you can transfer to another journal and perhaps it's published in there. It may be that you really think, well, no, you know, I think this was not fair. There is a good reason in here that something went strange in this review process, so I'm gonna appeal. There is this possibility in the physical review journals. You should be very mindful of using this opportunity, very thoughtful if it makes sense. And then a board member is gonna look your paper again and revise. If the paper is still rejected and there is any other reason, for example, ethical behavior that you suspect something still is not okay, you may appeal to the editor-in-chief, who is gonna revise the whole file. I will skip the note on appeal so that we have more time for the questions, but if anyone wanna ask about that, we can go through. And as I said, when your paper is accepted, to pay attention that you are still gonna receive proofs. So your paper goes to production, they are gonna change grammatical things in the paper and they have to format it. So they are gonna communicate with you to check if everything is fine. In many journals, we also ask you to send a key image, and you may engage with the press release office of your institution to promote your paper. So there are many ways to promote your result, go to conference, to meetings, and that also, if you engage with people, this also helps you to start a new collaboration. So you should definitely do a little bit of those. And so I wanna stop here mentioning this saying of Bernard Shaw: the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And I think it was a lot of what Matteo said, but it's also something not only when you are writing your paper, but in your communication to the referees, let's say when you are writing your rebuttal letter. Read it again and think if the words really represent what you have in mind. Sometimes we have a lot of context in our mind, but we just don't put it on the paper, and there is no way that the editor or the referee are gonna interpret, have a decent interpretation of what you are trying to say, because in fact you did not say. So, and then with that, thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Katiúscia, for the amazing talk. I think it's really interesting to hear from the editor's perspective. And we're now going to take questions from the audience.
And just to add, Matteo is here again. If you have more questions on the writing part, use the time.
Hi, Katiúscia. Thanks a lot for this talk. It was very interesting. I'm curious about the reasons why to be a referee. Could you speak a bit about it?
Yeah, sure. I could share the slides again, but let me try without it. So of course, sometimes we say, just from more the ideological part, we say, well, you submit a paper, you are relying on referees, and then it's only fair that you also should be a referee. That works for some people, not all of them. But I think there are other reasons why you should be a referee if you would like more self-centered reasons, what you have to gain with that. And I think what you have to gain, it's quite vast, actually. So first, as a young researcher, you get practice in criticizing papers. So you get practice in reading, and then having to share your objection or whatever you find that the paper should be improved in some ways. You have to be able to communicate that. And that per se is a good practice, that you start to get knowledge and on how exactly to phrase your ideas. So this is the first reason, but then you also get to see the review process from the other side. And this is also a lot of experience, because in the same way that you write your report, then you're going to receive a rebuttal letter, and you're going to see the way that the authors replied to your criticism. And in many cases, you learn a lot as well. How can you effectively, even if you have a strong criticism, how you reply to that? And is that convincing? What is the best way to do here? You're going to see the report from another referee, and you're going to see, whoa, there are so many other things that this referee said that I haven't thought about. How could I miss that? Or the other way around, you might say, oh, this referee said things that I don't think it makes sense. And you may tell the editor, right? And so there are all of those aspects. One of the other aspect important is that as a referee, you are ultimately defining what is important science, right? It comes from you to telling the editor, oh, this is relevant, this is very important, and here is why. But you are helping to define the standards. So you start to have a stronger relationship with the journal, and in a way, if you keep up with that, in a way, you start to become a leader in the field, because you are always sharing your opinion, right? So those are the ones that I remember right now. But I don't know, Matteo, do you want to add something here?
Yes, I would like something about becoming a referee. I think about the question, because it's something I discuss a lot with my students at the university, also postdocs and PhD students, and I really think it's an incredible way to be part of the scientific community, to feel part of that. And you can see, you're helping steer it and taking decision, and you are influencing, you're deciding where it goes. And it's a service. You're doing it for the others, but you're also learning a lot for yourself. I think you'll be better equipped to send your papers. You will have better chances for your submission to make more sense. I definitely recommend, people as young as possible. I would say you need a PhD, but as soon as you are a PhD, maybe a year into your postdoc, you should become a referee. And I would say there are two ways for doing this. One is, and the most typical one is, you co-referee a paper maybe with your supervisor or with one of your colleagues. And the second, you write to the editors of the journals that is mostly connected to you, and you suggest that you become a referee. And usually they're very happy. We're especially happy to explore pools of referees, outside the US and Europe, because we need them, and it's fair, and we want to be, diverse in that respect. So definitely encourage you all to become referees as soon as possible. It's good for you. It's good for science.
Okay.
Thanks. Thank you, Flavio. We have questions from YouTube. Frederico Campos Freitas is asking, how does the editor deal with some second round revisions which address different topics from the first, specifically about unchanged points of the text?
Okay, there are many possibilities in there. So if for some reason I need to consult a new referee in the second round, someone that was not there before, right? Then in many cases, I'm going to allow another round of review because, of course, the authors had no chance to reply to this referee. But there are other cases that, let's say, we are still using the same referees, but it always depends on how it was the paper. It could be that the referees could not understand very well the idea on the paper, so they could not have asked what they asked in the second round because it wasn't clear. And so then I think it's perfectly okay that the referee is going to have a new set of questions, right? And then it's always, in this business, it's always case by case. There is no general rule. But in the same way, when I say typically we let the authors have 2 rounds of review, then yeah, sometimes we have the third, but it really depends. So if it's something that the referee already asked and the authors could not successfully reply, then we would typically not have one more round because this was already in there. And we really do not want to have many successive rounds of review because we don't think that the review process is a way to turn a paper that was not publishable into something that's going to be published, right? This is not the work of the referee. It should be the work of the authors in the first place to already submit something that was closer to publication. So there are all of those considerations.
Bruno Rodrigues, also on from YouTube, is asking. He says he submitted a paper to PRL, and one of the referees suggested to move to PRE, and they sent it internally. And the new referee asked several questions and made suggestions, but the editor decided not to accept it. How to appeal?
Yeah, so it's, as I said, it's very hard to judge without looking the whole file, right? It's always case by case, but it really depends on the criticism of the referee. You know, it can be that from the point of view of the editors, the referee said something that was really, the editors consider that is not something that you can address, that will not change the opinion that in this case, since the referee said it could go to PRE, so I take that the paper is correct, everything's fine, but it was a matter of significance level. And so there is something in that the referee said that for the PRL editors, they consider that, well, it's not going to change. You can revise your paper, but the result is the result, right? It's already there. And so if this is the case, then really, no, you should not appeal. But if you think that the judgment, the whole review process, the referees, for some reason, they are really not being able to get the point, for some reason you think it's being unfair, maybe you can appeal. But I think, let me share the slides of the appeal. Okay, this is perhaps an important one. No, it's here, 1 second. Because sometimes the editors, the authors abuse a little bit of the appeal, I have to say, but okay. So here we go. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, that was not the appeal, sorry. Okay, here. Right. So the appeal is the following. So the paper goes to a board member. This is not another round of review. What the board member is going to do is the board member has access to the file, so they know the identity of the referees. They read the reports, so they're going to judge those referees. They are qualified, right? They're qualified. They know what they are saying. That's the first thing. then they're going to read the report and see if the report makes sense. Is anything crazy in this report? Right. Then, based on that, they will see if the decision to reject based on those reports, right? If you have substance enough in that to come to a conclusion. And if so, it's not like the board member is going to ignore the file and, oh, let me read here. I read and I tell everything by myself. It's not like that, okay? So in borderline cases, the rejection will stand. The only way that the rejection is going to turn into an acceptance is really that the board member see, oh, this paper is exceptionally good. It should be published, really. Unfortunately, for some reason, the referee is missed, but it's a really good paper. That's when the appeal is going to may turn into an acceptance. So typically, appeal is very unsuccessful. So you should use, it's a tool for you, it's a tool to protect you, but you should use it in a mindful way, right? Because if every time we reject a paper, you decide to appeal, come on, and you saw in the beginning how many thousands of papers we have. Those are the acceptance. You can see that rejections is much more. We have a few board members. You cannot use all of them all the time to be judging all rejections. And so what happens is that if you don't use it wisely, when you really need, your paper is going to be waiting for the report of a board member for many, many months, and you're just going to overburden everybody. So it's there to protect you, but just try to make a good use.
One more question from YouTube. Jorge Cardoso asks, is there any type of cover letter that jeopardizes the manuscript? As an editor, what do you prefer not to see on a cover letter?
Oh, no, typically, I mean, as you write, I can't think, I never saw a cover letter that would in any way cause harm to the review process. No, there isn't. The only thing is you have a quick look. If it's not interesting, I don't read in detail. That's it. Being very honest, that's what happens. So no, it will not at all cause harm. But again, it's something that can help you. That's the point. It can help you because you're gonna convince me that it's good to send to referees, and I'm gonna pay if I'm interested in. I think. Well, yeah, let's say that perhaps one other way that the cover letter can help is when you also clarify a few things. For example, if it's an interdisciplinary paper and you let me know a little bit more what referees, what expertises I should use to judge your paper. Maybe this is something that can also help you because of course, this is my job to choose the referees, but in an interdisciplinary paper, it might be that I grasp some parts of it that I think that are the most relevant, and I'm going to choose the referees based on that. And perhaps I'm a little wrong in my judgment, and if you tell me that in the cover letter, I will pay attention to those other parts as well. So, yeah.
Tariq has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Matteo, you want to add a comment?
I had a little comment on cover letters that may not be useful, may not be detrimental. I'm seeing it from an external perspective because I'm reading the correspondence, but I'm not handling manuscripts, of course. I can say that the editors really are very able to look beyond cover letters. I've seen examples where the authors themselves say, maybe you shouldn't publish this paper. Truly, like sometimes you get this funny cover letters. I don't think you'll be interested, but I'm going to try anyhow. Things like this, and they end up getting published because I think the editors anyhow will look at the paper, will look at the abstract. So there is really nothing you can do wrong by submitting a cover letter. One thing that can be very useful is if there is related work that you just did to clarify what is the new or maybe related work that somebody else published, to clarify the difference, because sometimes it's a bit hard, even for the referees, to see the progress. Maybe sometimes, you know, depending on the referee, maybe they're a little quick, maybe they're not too deep. Sometimes they see, oh, this paper was just published in Nature and this is very similar, so maybe you shouldn't publish it. So if you are aware of something that's really related and you don't want to be accused of salami slicing your paper, I think it's very good to point out exactly what differentiate your paper. And I think that's a really great, because maybe you cannot do that in the paper. So that's a really great thing to do in a cover letter that can save your paper.
Thanks. Tariq, do you want to ask your question now?
Hi, I have a question regarding to the resubmission process. There is some time limit or some period of time that you should not pass, and the judgment starts to be against you. You know.
Yeah. So yes and no. Okay, as I said, it's always case by case, but we always accept resubmissions. But what can happen, I think, after 6 months, the status of your paper may change to inactive. And if you're not able to log in the system and submit, you can always write a letter, and we are gonna change the status and you can resubmit. This is fine. But of course, then there are the different levels in there. And if your paper is supposed to be one of a high impact that has this exceptionally great result, if you take too long to resubmit, then we might start to wonder, well, how is the literature right now? Has someone else published something similar meanwhile? So then we might need to consult the referees again to judge this part one more time. So just that, but typically you can take your time. Of course, if it's years, again, then it's like starting the process from scratch. And at that time, we may decide that, well, okay, this is not relevant anymore. Those are the risks.
Yeah, thank you.
Paulo Nussensweig.
Hey, Kati. Of course, I would have a lot of questions, but we can save those for some other time. One thing that I think could be useful for us as a community, having people from the physical review here, is, do you have any kind of statistic regarding numbers of submissions and success rate for Brazilian authors in the physical review journals? And of course, I'm particularly interested in knowing whether in this new journal, PRX Quantum, are we making a mark? And what should we do to make a better mark?
Yeah, so we certainly have statistics about that. Of course, I do not have the numbers here right now, but I think I'm almost sure we can make this available. I have to check with the publisher, but I think that that geographical things, I think it's perfectly okay, but we can check that. So from the back of my mind, yes, I have seen several papers submit from Brazil in PX Quantum, which is quite nice to see. We appreciate that. It is something that the journals do pay attention, and we try to increase the diversity in the publication. So what I want to say is the following. So sometimes we know that in some countries you may struggle more for funding and so on. So, and it's interesting, we just have a talk about that in the office about equity, also in the sense that when we choose our board members, if you don't have a good representation of people from different regions, this also may create a little bit of, even if you want to say unconscious bias in the process, because those are the people that, as we said, who are the referees? Are the referees all Americans? If they are all Americans, that may have an effect on the papers that are going to be published in the journal. So we try to pay attention to have a diverse pool of referees, diverse pool of board members, and we try to reach different communities to submit the papers to us. And the thinking is really that depending on the community, I wouldn't say Brazil, but in general, if the paper is good, of course, has to be good, has to go through peer review. But in some cases, as I said, there is this curation thing. And if we feel like, okay, we're not having a good representation of this community here, the paper is good. So let's say it's borderline. So I push where? I push up or down. It's my decision in the end. And so in some cases, this might be something that we consider, depending on the journal. But we may, because it makes a difference for the younger generation, right? To see that you have representation of your science in there. That's what engaged people as well to keep doing science and right. So we have a little bit of these considerations. I can say that I think Brazil is doing well in general. I don't have the numbers in here. Brazil has for sure several outstanding referees that I do remember. So APS has this prize, I don't know if everybody knows, but every year we select a pool of people that we call outstanding referees. So there are several Brazilians in that. There are several papers from Brazil that are highlighted in physics, and Mateo can comment a little bit more in that, meaning that not only they're being published, but they are exceptionally good. So those papers also appear in physics. But I agree with you that there are things that we can do to help. And I think, well, the event today is one, right? That helps to engage more with the community and give some tips on how to get better, because you have excellent research, but sometimes you get in trouble because of the review process, because of the writing and so on. So, yeah.
Maybe Katiúscia can add a couple of words to Paulo's question. I think we can provide the statistics. Usually Manolis used to actually prepare them for every editor who would go to visit a specific university to say, you know, how many papers. So I think we could ask him to give us some numbers. So I think this is some information that we can give. And the second is, probably Paulo's question might have also be related to bias in the review process. I get that question a lot. I've given a lot of talk in in Spanish-speaking Latin America, not in Brazil. And it's a very common question. Do you think that the editors are biased because we're not from the US or because of our language or because of anything? And to that, I think I can, you know, vouch for our editors that absolutely I don't see any form of this bias, but it is hard to quantify, it is hard to exclude, for instance, the referees might be biased. Personally, and I'm not speaking for the APS here, I think we should go for double-blind peer review. I think it's a much fairer, although might not be too practical, but it's not just because of geographic origin, it's just, you know, your competitors evaluating you and knowing who you are and helping friends and stuff. I think there are many, many reasons to go double-blind, and I am personally a big supporter of that. The APS is thinking about issues like this. They're offering as a choice. I don't think it's a solution we're going to take for right now. But I do think that for the refereeing process, it could be a useful thing to think about. But we can definitely give you guys some statistics, I think. I don't know about specific rejection rates. There may be, this is I don't know if this is confidential, so I don't think so. But we can definitely ask people to produce something, you know, the most information we can give.
I see no further questions, and this is actually a good point to wrap up. We're on time. And I believe I speak for everyone here that when I say that we learned a lot today from both talks. So thank you so much, Katiúscia and Mateo, for all the helpful tips. And since this is also the last talk of the autumn meeting, I would like to thank everybody who participated on behalf of the organizers. And we look forward to the next edition of this meeting. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo.
Thank
It
you.
was a fun meeting. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for being here so late. Bye-bye.